what do you think your kids are seeing, right? When your kids are older, what sort of relationship would you want your kids to have with their partner? Because they're watching you.
What's up, Core Nation? Welcome to another episode of Coin for Thought. Today on this episode, I have Jenn again. Jennifer Barkin is on the show again, and I am so excited because we are going to be talking about all things parenting plans, parenting coordination, and really defining what those terms mean. So thank you so much for being on the show and educating us about this.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me back.
Yeah, it's great. You know what? I find that now, I find in my world right now, there's a lot of people that are getting divorced with younger children, right? People are realizing, hey, you know what? I can't have my children in this environment. This environment is really toxic for my child. Say, for example, if there's a toxic parent, I don't want my kid to be like essentially following in the steps of this toxic parent. I need to remove my kid from this situation. And, it's that whole term where it's like happier individually, better apart. What is that? What's that term?
Okay, so that we're better parents when we're apart than when we're together.
Right.
Because when you have a house that has a lot of conflict, right? Mm-hmm. Children are so smart. They pick up on these vibes. So even if the parents are not fighting or arguing, let's say mom or dad moved down to the basement and they're now suddenly sleeping on the couch and we're not having family dinner together anymore. Or, mom's going out every night or dad's going out every night and the parents are never in the home together at the same time because it's so icy. The children pick up on that. And what's interesting, and I speak to a lot of people about, should I stay or should I go? And I'm not going to tell people what to do, but I'll ask them those questions that'll help them sort of think, right? So that's part of my coaching practice. And some of those questions are going to be, what do you think your kids are seeing? Right? When your kids are older, what sort of relationship would you want your kids to have with their partner? Because they're watching you. They're watching everything. So parents will say also, well, I'm just going to wait until my children are in high school or until they're in university and they've left the nest. And that's when we're going to do this. Right? And I'm going, the kids have picked up on things all of these years, and interviews with children later on, they're like, my parents should have done this years ago. Right?
Yes.
Now, saying that, you speak to kids, and most kids, and even in the worst abusive situations, will say, if they had a wish, it would be for their parents to be together. But that wish includes differences. Right? That my parents would love each other, that they'd be friends, but not the way. But if they had to choose growing up in this icy cold environment or where there's a lot of conflict or a lot of fighting, or having parents that are apart and living, in a more peaceful environment, they're like, my parents should have done this earlier. I don't know why they waited. So parents think they're doing the kids a favor, but they're not.
I agree with that because, I grew up in a very hostile environment, and it took a toll on me growing up. And, I know my mom was thinking about like, I can't leave this relationship. I have a young daughter. Right. But at the same time, I felt like it's because it's the control. As a child, you don't really have control over these two adults in your lives. Right. So you're essentially facing a lot of the consequences to what's happening in their relationship and the back and forth, and you're getting affected by it. So now let's just say, people are deciding to leave. One of the big things that, a lot of people get nervous about, especially moms, right? And I know that, the courts are listening more to dads and all of that, right? Because dads want to be more involved. It's not just default mom anymore, but there's always that concern. How is it going to work if we separate And then what's going to happen to the schedule of our children? How are we going to manage ourselves with having like 1, 2, 3 kids, whatever the case is? How are we going to manage ourselves? So I want you to define what's the difference between parenting plan and parenting coordination.
Okay, so let's start with parenting plans. When parents are separating, whether they are common law or married couples that have children together, they need some sort of blueprint, some sort of roadmap for how they're going to take care of the children moving forward, meaning when they're not together anymore. And from both sides, there's a lot of fear, right? And that's another reason why people stay together. We stay together for the kids. I would say, and this is not from research, but people don't go into a relationship or have children together to say, you know what, I want to be a part-time parent one day. That's where the difficulty comes. I work a lot of helping people with their emotional understanding. Not being with your children full time does not mean you're not a parent all the time. So in English, if my children are not with me, let's say this weekend, I'm still their mom. Right. But people have a hard time just getting past that. Right. And then there's the fear. I've been working with the client for a while now of he's afraid to leave. He's thinking she's going to hate me and she's going to poison the children against me. And maybe I'll just stay so that doesn't happen, even though I'm not happy.
That's very common. It's that fear that the children are going to be poisoned. And a lot of times too, and I always tell clients, my clients, I was like, do not get your kids involved into the nitty gritties of your legal stuff and your financial stuff. It's none of their business. But sometimes kids, especially ones that are older, that are teenagers, they're very intuitive. They can kind of see what's going on. They catch little pieces of conversation, and then they fill in the blanks, and that can be so damaging. A lot of times, maybe a parent doesn't have somebody to talk to, or they're just angry. They're voicing things out loud.
Yeah.
Kids are hearing that, or they're speaking to the children about, hey, your dad's an asshole. He did this and that, or how dare blah, blah, blah. And that's huge, right? Or here's a letter. I had a client where her spouse showed letters from lawyers to their teenage children. And that for me I was like, wow, I can't believe that you're doing.
There's behavior of parents bringing their kids into these conflicts and showing them the legal. Mom says that we have to sell the house because of dad. And I'll say, well, what do you mean because of dad? Well, daddy and mommy showed me, and it's like, okay, these are just things that you don't do. So a lot of it is explaining to parents, they have one mom, they have one father. Okay. You guys may have made a really bad decision by deciding to get together in the first place. Right. Okay. And choosing to separate is your choice. But your children did not choose any of this.
Right.
And what we do know is if the kids are not brought into the conflict and the parents protect the children in that way, these kids grow up fine.
Right.
But when the kids are dragged into this, you see more depression, you see alcohol, promiscuity, drug abuse, all sorts of things as they age. Right. So there's that saying, love your children more than you hate your ex. Right. I'm not telling you to love your ex. You don't even have to like them. But we got to move this relationship to a co-parenting relationship, and one that's not of an intimate partner relationship where you can just, the way you speak to your husband or wife. We now move it. We treat you. Okay. Children are the business. We want the business to do well. So this is how we communicate now. Please, thank you. A little more formally, non-accusatory. Just focus on the kids. But we've gone off track. So parenting plans. What's a parenting plan?
Yeah. And is a parenting plan needed for children that are teenagers that often, have a say in which parent they want to stay with and what they want to do? They have their own lives and their own schedules that they would like to follow. They have comforts that they also are holding on to as their world is changing. They're like, my neighborhood, my friends, I walk to the bus with this person, or, oh my gosh, like I meet my friends after school here, or, people come over to my house every Sunday and do whatever, So as they're kind of holding on to their world, as like the world around them is crumbling, how do parenting plans work for teenagers? And do they work for teenagers? Should we do them for teenagers?
Okay, so I'll just explain quickly a parenting plan. If you think of it, a blueprint of how parents are going to co-parent the children moving forward. And in that parenting plan are so many different things. But the two number one major things are the decision-making for children. Is it going to be sole decision-making? Is it going to be joint decision-making? And decision-making has nothing to do with the time you're with your kids. It's really just decision-making on the healthcare, the education, and the religion. Right? So then there's that second big part, which is the parenting time, when your children are physically with you, when they're with you. So that's when we get to the schedule. But in addition to those two big decisions, there's how our holiday is going to be spent. What's going to happen if I want to leave the country with my child? I'm going to need a notarized letter. How am I going to get this notarized letter? What's going to happen with who can be around the children? Is there somebody that shouldn't be? What if I can't take care of the children during my parenting time? Should there be something called the first right of refusal, meaning before I call in the troops, my mother, my father, a babysitter, that I will offer my co-parent, hey, I have the flu or whatever. Can you help me out? Parent can say no because everybody has a life. You might not be able to, but first right of refusal means you offer that time first. So there's so many things that go into this parenting plan. And the real purpose is, number one, for child support, we have to know the children's residential schedule because that's going to impact the amount of support that's payable. But to keep parents out of conflict, like if people haven't decided on things, it's amazing the things that come up. And when things come up, and then there's conflict where parents cannot agree upon, that's when I'm getting my lawyer, I'll see you in court, et cetera, right? So really, this is, let's keep conflict away. Now, if people are getting along well, for example, you and I are soon to be ex-spouses. We have a parenting plan for our two twin boys. I'm going to be Jeff now. And I'm not wishing this on you. It's never going to happen. But anyway, and our parenting plan says, well, Nikki has the boys for the Christmas school break, the 2 weeks, during the odd years. And Jennifer, aka Jeff, has them during the even years. And Nikki says, Jenn, I won some trip to Disney World. Can we switch this year? Right? A good co-parent is going to go, absolutely. Why not? Like, it doesn't matter what the parenting plan says at this point. You take him this year and I'll take him next year. But when there's a lot of conflict and parents aren't in agreement, it's very simple to say, you know what? Go to clause 14B, page 6 of our parenting plan. This year, the children are with me. Right? So you're not always having motions and letters going back and forth. So it's a good tool to keep things moving smoothly for families.
I see. Now, what is parenting coordination?
Parenting coordination, firstly, a parenting coordinator might be retained by parents when there's already an existing court order or an existing parenting plan. And for whatever reason, things are not working. Parents are not abiding by what they have to do. Generally, these are families that they were pretty volatile. Anyway, it was a tough divorce, a tough separation. And they've come to some sort of agreement, whether it's been a court order again or a parenting plan, but things are not working. So it might be you're supposed to pay this percentage of the daycare and this person's not paying for it. Or the holidays, you're not abiding by what you're supposed to be doing. But for whatever reason, they cannot communicate well together. And there may be a lot of nastiness going back and forth. So the children are actually getting pulled in the middle, right? There's, this one's poisoning the kids against this parent. This one is not allowing the children to come for my parenting time. I go to pick up the kids and they're on their gaming systems. And I'm just going to say, mom is saying, oh, sorry, this one has a headache. So this parenting plan that's been in existence, it's not working. So the parenting coordinator is a person who's normally has a mental health background, also has a mediation background, so can mediate high conflict situations, that would be brought in by the parents to help them. Hey, help us out because we're not doing well, right? And we need somebody involved. So it is something that falls under the ADR umbrella, which is alternative dispute resolution. It's voluntary, so you can't force people to see a parenting coordinator or retain a parenting coordinator. I am seeing, though, more orders now saying if this isn't working, the parents will seek out the help of a parenting coordinator. But the parenting coordinator is voluntary. Both parents split the cost of the parenting coordinator services equally because that maintains the parenting coordinator's neutrality. So it's not like, oh, she's siding with her or him because he's footing the bill here. And if people sign up with the parenting coordinator can educate. So how is this affecting your children, or what's best for kids at this developmental age? The parenting coordinator will try to get people on the same page. The parenting coordinator, if that's not really working, will bring them to mediation to see what's driving this conflict. Usually with conflict, it's not what I'm saying to you. There's all these other underlying hurt, anger, whatever. So we'll work through that. But at the end of the day, the parenting coordinator has the rights of an arbitrator, okay, and is a trained arbitrator. An arbitrator can make legal binding decisions. It's essentially a judge, but outside the courtroom. So, you're not going to Google the names and case number, whatever comes up. But it's a very powerful role to be an arbitrator. Saying that, there are two places where a parenting coordinator cannot arbitrate. And those are in changing the amount of time, the amount of parenting time a parent has with the child. So you down the road say, you know what, Jenn, the kids are really parked on the couch and you're not feeding them properly, so I'm going to take away the time. A parenting coordinator cannot do that. The only way to reduce time, and it's not an easy thing to do, is somebody's going to have to either self-rep in court or retain lawyers to help with this and to ask for a motion to change the amount of time. But a parenting coordinator, if a schedule is not working, so as children grow, a schedule may not be working. The original parenting time schedule, right? Let's say it was originally a 2-2-3, a very popular one. Well, that can work for little kids. It's 2 days, one parent, 2 days, the other parent, 3 days with the other parent. As kids get older, well, firstly, it can get confusing. Which parent am I at today? I have to check the calendar. I want to be signed up for gymnastics on Thursday, but I never know if I'm with mom or dad. And dad won't be able to drive on this such and such day. Or there's this activity at school and I can't even sign up because I never know where I am. So it might not work. And that's when, I might have a parent that's stuck and go, nope, this schedule is good for me. I don't want to move it, but it's not really working for your child. So the parenting coordinator can come in and go, well, I understand what I'm seeing is the 50%, that's what's important. And I can't change that anyway, but there's other ways of doing 50%. And here are some other things that other families do that work for them, right? So we can change the times and the days. But the other thing I cannot change as a parenting coordinator is who has the decision making. So what I've been seeing is people get worn down and may have given, let's say, the other parent sole decision making. And then years later, when they're in parenting coordination, it's like, I've not consulted, or, and they're very, very angry about this decision. And that's not something that I'm able to change. Now, these people who are with the parenting coordinator are generally very high conflict. So their communication has been pretty horrendous as far as, if I say you always, right, and just throwing shade, the parenting coordinator will put them on what's called a parenting app. So something like our Family Wizard is a popular one. It allows all of us, the parents and me, to be on this app and to monitor the conversation. So that's a way that I can teach parents how to communicate post-separation and divorce. That again, I cannot, they cannot say things to one another. This is part of the reason you're getting into trouble with one another and you're not getting cooperation, because look how you're speaking to one another. So I can teach those skills of communication and how we communicate as a co-parent rather than as a former spouse.
So this wizard is a recorder of conversation?
So our Family Wizard, and I'm not piping them as far as not getting any money from them or anything like that. But really, it's probably the best one to use. It has, and this is their terminology, a built-in tone meter. So in other words, parents are sending text to one another, and the tone meter, it lights up red if this is inappropriate. So I'm calling you about you. Yeah, may want to think that before you press send, right? It also has calendars, so all the scheduling can go, or I can upload things. So my child made a pretty picture in preschool today, and I want to share with my co-parent. But it's also a record of all the communication, all the conversations. Some of the American courts for years have actually used it for evidence. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know really what they're doing here as far as that, because we're not where they are. But it's a very good record.
I always say, the higher conflict you are, the more expensive your divorce is going to be. So if you get along, things are going to be easier. The more you get along, the more easier it's going to be, the cheaper it's going to be, right? Because how much does a parenting, I assume that it's paid by the hour, right?
A retainer.
A retainer. So how much is a general retainer? How are parenting coordinators paid? What is the range? I assume that there's
a range,
different ranges. What's the range of a parenting coordinator?
Okay, so this is not a cheap process by any means. And the overall cost is really going to depend on the family. And what I mean by that, so at the beginning, people are going to sign up. Usually it's a 2-year contract. And that's really to get people committed to the process, right? And the reason for the retainer is, look, at somebody's getting angry all the time. So,
Yeah.
And when people are spending money, they're hopefully going to be a little more cognizant of, maybe we don't have to keep doing this and sending this and doing this and this, because it's going to rack up that bill and my retainer is going to run out, right? So what's going to happen with the parenting coordinator? So let's say generally a 2-year contract, right, of let's say 20 hours at $300 an hour. Okay. So a lot of money, you split that there's your retainer, and everything. It's every email, every phone call, every meeting, and it ships away, right? So if you have somebody that's being very high conflict and starting to abuse, right, because I don't care, I just want to like make their life miserable, they'll get a warning. I'll give a warning. And then after a while, you'll start to, okay, I'm going to have to attribute this cost 100% to you because you're just like with this nonsense. You're not listening. You're not doing the things you need. I will send people out for maybe some mental health therapy or coaching because just sometimes they just can't get out of that space. And it's just ringing up a bill like this. And that's not right to the other party either.
I want to hope that a parenting coordinator is like the end all. But, what if a parenting coordinator says, whoa, like I'm trying my best and
all the time,
and things are still not working
all the time.
And so what are things that a parenting coordinator does at that point when they're like, I've tried all these things and these people are just being so ridiculous and they just can't come together? And
I have a file like that right now.
Yeah.
Which right from the onset, this is just, I'll give you a few examples. Right. When a father feels that children have a free-for-all at mom's house, and a free-for-all meaning the kids aren't going to school, the kids are sleeping in, the kids are on game systems all night. They're not showing up to my house. She's not making them come. She's showing up to my house unexpectedly, going in my house, taking things, etc., etc. Okay, so we have a couple of things going on. Number one, boundaries, right? Stay off this person's property, okay? You can't just go into their home, okay? Absolutely not, right? And cameras and accusing of stealing and all kinds of garbage, but it's still going on, okay? So telling her not to, it's not happening. Call the police, right? What am I going to do here? And as far as children not going to school and not performing, there's a lot of history with these particular children, mental health history, predominantly mental health history, even prior to all of this separation stuff, some learning disabilities, et cetera, et cetera. So now I'm going to draw my mental health background. And when it comes to children, or anybody, I don't like to make assumptions, right? So an assumption would be this parent's not doing parenting piece, and these kids are just flat out refusing and running wild, like other parents says. And I'm going to look at this history and say, so I have this going on. I have this going on. So my first question is going to be something like, the last psychoeducational report I see was done 5 years ago. These are the ages of your children. Ideally, psychoeducational reports, when parents can afford to do them, should be redone every 3 years. And why is that? Because certain things that they can test for. So, for example, if I have 5-year-old little kids, I may, there's ADHD that we're seeing that. But let's say a higher level learning disability in this area isn't going to show up because the child doesn't have the language or the reading capability at 5, as they should not. But if I would do this same tests done on a 9-year-old, now this is showing up and this showing up. So I like to know first, is there anything else going on that is impacting, right? What should this child be sent to therapist to find out what's going on, right?
Right.
Because I don't want to start going to a parent, well, clearly you're not doing what you need to do. And this is all your fault, right? I want to know, let's see what's going on. And then we can figure out. So this family, right, it's flat out refusal. One parent says, yeah, let's get this done. And the other parent, there's an excuse. I see excuses. Well, I can't afford therapy. In some cases, that can be true, right? But I have one, and the woman's a teacher. And I'm like, help me to understand. So you work for the school board. You have one of the best benefit packages around. This is not coming out of your pocket. So explain, right? Because it's not making sense. So sometimes, it's like anything else. I can put these recommendations forward, but if people aren't taking them and are just going, well, the judge said we got to do some parenting coordination, and I'm just going along with it. I showed up, right? But they're not taking anything into consideration. This is going to be a mess. So either one, I'm going to have to arbitrate, mediate, arbitrate, and then ultimately arbitrate. And then after that, if somebody's still not abiding, they're going to have to go to court.
Yeah. Yeah. And and court is so expensive, right? So more expensive than you working with your parenting coordinator. Right?
It's so expensive. And the reasons are, general public will think, okay, I have this problem. I'm going to get my day in court and we're done, right? But the court system is a process. So, before you get your day, and it might not be a day in court, how long is this trial going to be? And a family law lawyer would speak better to this than I would. But generally, depending on the issues, is this a 2-day trial? Is it a 5-day trial? You're paying for your lawyer's time, right? And they're not just at court, but all that prep time beforehand, whether it's the letters and the preparing of motions and factums, et cetera, et cetera. So this all adds up, all the disbursements, every photocopy, every email, and depending on your lawyer's hourly rate as well, which in Toronto, I know lawyers that are $800 an hour. I know lawyers that are $300. So that's going to impact. But people don't just go to court. First we're going to have a case conference at the court. Then we're going to have maybe a settlement. Then we're getting a conference. Then a trial management conference. And it can take a long, long time. So maybe a year, maybe a year and a half, maybe 2 years.
Maybe 2 years, yeah.
Right? So what happens in that time to conflict? It's getting worse and worse and worse. And if a parent is, poisoning a child against the other parent, or a child's refusing to visit the other parent, it's getting worse and worse, worse and worse. So parenting coordination can help in the way that this might take a long time, even if you want to go to court to get to that. Can we get any of this resolved so that things don't continue to tank? And who's at risk here? The kids.
The kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it seems silly that people would refuse, because, part of, childcare really is, if your kid needs something in terms of mental health or whatever, you're in a high conflict situation with your spouse or ex-spouse, at least the priority should be them, supporting them in every way possible, making sure that they grow up to be contributing, sane members of society, right? Because it's so damaging. The conflict is so incredibly damaging. And you're right. Like, you don't know how kids are going to take that all in. I know adults right now that had, parents that got a divorce. It wasn't really even high conflict, but it was really damaging for them. Right. So even now they have so much trauma from the stress of that divorce. And that divorce wasn't a high conflict divorce. So different kids take it all in different ways. And, and especially when there's high conflict, it's worse, right? And you don't know how your kid's going to turn out. You don't know what you're going to do. And that's just silly. You have benefits, use those benefits to be able to support your kids. That's what benefits are for. Right. And, if you have to get an assessment, the assessment may cost like $3,000 or $5,000, something like that. Right. To get an assessment. But then you're not essentially spinning your wheels on the day-to-day with your kid, because you might be trying certain things with your child and that might not be working. And you might be so frustrated, but they probably have a learning disability or they probably need a certain level of care. And if you just understand that and you educate yourself on that, parenting for you is going to be a lot easier. Because you can give them the support, but you can also have that understanding. Sometimes it just takes someone else to be able to do an assessment, to be able to educate you, and then it just clicks. Oh, that's why they've been behaving like this. This is why they've been reacting like this. This is why, I've been sitting down with them and having them and doing homework with them, but they're not getting it. And we're frustrated. This is why. It's because their brain works in a certain way or something else is going on. Okay, maybe it's the wrong information that they're not meant to be processing because it's way over their level. And it doesn't matter that kids of the same age are learning the same things, right? So that also is so important. It's so important to understand that about your child, right? So I very much connect with that. What are a lot of questions that you get, about parenting coordination or generally parenting plans? What are usually things, what are the first questions that people kind of like come up with, to ask you?
Okay. So with parenting plans, people want to sometimes know, can I get this or can I get that? And I always say, well, you guys can decide between you. As a mediator, my role is neutral, right? So if you're on very different pages, my role will be to find out, what are you scared of? Why are you angry? Why are you stuck in this place? I might offer ideas, right? So I've had other families and very similar. This is what this one's done. This is what this one's done. This is what this one's done. So these people may go, I never even considered that or knew that that was a possibility or we may come up with some sort of hybrid thing of this works and this works. So let's put this together, right? So mostly schedules like the first thing. But people will also ask, can I get this? And it's like, you're going to have to get some independent legal advice on this, because I can speak under what's called the shadow of the law, meaning very general, but not particular to you. How much child support, well, not child support, that's a bad example. How much spousal support would I get, right? I can print out divorce mate as a mediator and I can show them, okay, so here's what it says. There's a range. It's a midterm marriage and et cetera, child support's being paid. So there's this range. This is the low, the mid, the high. But I can't say things like, okay, you would get the high amount for sure. And you would get 15 years of this. I cannot, right? I can bring people to agreement by, let's discuss this. Let's talk about what, were you a stay-at-home mom during the marriage, let's say, and would you say you've been away from your career for 10 years? So if you hadn't taken that time off, where do you think you'd be in your career and how much would you be making? And I might say to the other person, right? So you started here, I think back 10 years, and now you're here. And who made dinner and who drove the kids to school and who took the kids to activities and did homework with them. There is compensatory support, so an acknowledgement that the other person should be compensated, right? Does that make sense to you? Do you want to get some legal advice around that issue? So those are, number one, support and time with kids. Those are the number ones. But then we get into all the holidays and how communication and this person, how am I going to co-parent with this person because they don't listen to me or they berate me or whatever it is. So a parenting plan can have very clear expectations for communication. Will the communication with the kids be open so my kids can contact me anyway, anytime? Do I need some boundaries in this with my co-parent? So, for example, how quickly I have to respond to non-emergency email, right? Do I need will the parents be communicating on a parenting app? Who's going to look after holding on to the children's ID and getting things like passports and renewals, and how are you going to share in the costs, and so many things. So some parents come very prepared and they've looked on the web and they have found examples. They've spoken to family and friends, and even I have a client right now who's brought me 2 parenting plans from other people. We like this, and then you read through and I'm like, okay, this, so they come very prepared and have an idea. And there are other people that like, why do we need this in the first place? Can't we just decide on things? And you can, but right. Number one, they're going to have something if they want to get a separation agreement. How these kids are going to be co-parented. It has to include the child supports, can have to include the parenting time and decision making. So you're not going to be able to ever get a divorce if you don't have this, right? Or a separation agreement. That's before divorce. But people will say, well, why do we get along? Why do we have to? And I'll say, I would love a magic wand where I could predict everything in the future that might come up. But what if one of you remarries and now your kids don't like his kids or her kids, and your kid doesn't want to go? So what a parenting plan can have in it are some dispute resolution clauses. So things like, what if there's a major change of circumstance? What are we going to do? And it'll name them, it'll list them. And it could be illness of a parent, illness of a child. Like if I'm all of a sudden disabled and I can't care for my children, what happens in the same way, right? I got hit by a truck. I got taken down by COVID. I don't know. Somebody remarries. The parenting plan says, well, we're going to live close to X school because this is how we're spending time, both parents' houses, and parents can do this, but now another parent gets a job transfer somewhere else. So a dispute resolution clause will cover these sort of things. So first we're going to talk. We can't get to an agreement. We'll see the accredited mediator within, 30 days prior to commencing a court proceeding. So there's all sorts of things to keep things running smoothly as things move forward. And with parenting plans, I call them a living agreement, really the best ones, because as I say, I don't know my 5-year-old what my 15-year-old's going to need. Right. And you asked me a question earlier about if my kids are high school age, why do I need this? Right. So there's things you may want in there. Is there going to be a voice of the child where the children decide what their schedule is going to look like and who they're going to spend time with? And that's all going to affect child support. Child support, people think, ends when kids are 18. Not necessarily. It couldn't be until the end of the first degree. That's something or university college degree. It's something that we see quite a bit now. And even holidays, like if I have a 14-year-old and you want Christmas Eve at grandma's and the other parent is going, no, I want this. Well, now what? You don't want to go into your children and be going, so what do you guys want to do? Because kids are going to be saying to each parent, maybe what they want to hear, what each parent wants to hear. And that's not the real story. Right. They're telling both of you what you want to hear. So you're not getting the truth. And you're dragging kids into your conflict. So I don't care if these kids are 6, if these kids are 12 or 13, we never want to bring kids into parental conflict.
Those are really wise words. I have, say, a client right now who's in a situation where she did most of the parenting and the father was very much away. He was a traveler. He worked abroad. He barely, like the kid doesn't even know their dad, right? And now they're trying to get a divorce. And even after they got separated, she left for a bit overseas to stay with her family for a little bit, took her son, and now she's back. And the big concern is that, oh my God, if we have 50-50, what's going to happen? My kid is going to be in a situation where they're going to be staying with a stranger.
Hey, how old is the child?
Under 5.
Okay. So that's where that child development piece first has to come in, right? Is this in the best interest of this child, this particular child, right? So now, child with a stranger, I can think of all sorts of things. So the child probably has an attachment to mom, doesn't know dad very well. Is this really a good idea? Now, we're playing devil's advocate, right? We have a dad now who's willing and wants to be more involved with his child. Excellent, right? But this is where the problem comes. So what are some creative solutions to fix this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if I was mediating with this couple, I would talk about, changing a child's world upside down overnight, even though you mean well, right? And this is something I would commend the other parent, like, this is excellent that you want, right? This is really good, because I believe children in the best scenarios have a good relationship with both their parents, that moms offer children different things than dads do, right? So, you get different things from both of your parents to become a well-rounded person. And you have a dad who's willing to be involved and maybe couldn't. And let's think of why he couldn't. Maybe he had to travel for business and that's what paid the bills and that's what kept the child in a certain, right? It's not, I didn't want to be with you, right? So it helped mom understand that, let's say, that it's not that he didn't want to. It wasn't feasible at that time, but things have changed. But going back to this child, so maybe I understand dad wants to get to 50-50, right? Mom, this is hard for you because been at your hip for all these years. Have you guys considered something like a graduated schedule or a graduated parenting plan so that we're not doing this to the kid overnight, right? So what if we begin with visit, right? Visit a short time, right, etc. And there has to be some therapy for the child. The child didn't know the father, let's say, of who this is. I would bring in a child therapist at that age, a play therapist, before any of this would take place. So graduated. So then we can work some therapy and get to the point where child is ready to meet father, and then maybe have, let's say, dinner time or whatever with dad. So now dad's not a stranger, right? There would be a lot of screening with both of them to see that there's any mental health issues or any concerns of safety, because look at this child, pretty much a stranger. But let's say that's going well. So then we might come back and review in a couple of months, how are things going? Maybe introduce some more parenting time, right? So maybe a Saturday or a Sunday, another review, with trying it overnight, right? So, and then another review, and maybe more overnight, with the expectation that the idea is that both parents acknowledge that children or child here should have an excellent relationship with the other parent and that they will both encourage it. But to meet that child's needs, right? We're not just going to go, okay, 1 week you with this stranger here and 1 week here. we can build it up.
Right. So last question. And I know that a lot of people have this question. Most of my clients have this question. And there's always, one parent that's more involved with the child, usually in relationships. For my relationship, that's my husband, right? He's the one like dropping the kids off to school, and catering his work schedule really around the kids' schedule. But for me, I can't do that, right? So I'm not often there to give the kids a good night kiss, every night.
You got the mama guilt.
I know I'm busy, right?
I'll work with you on that. It's like, no, but look at all these other things your children gain from you, right? And it's actually not the time. I call it working mom guilt, right?
Yeah. But say, for example, Jeff and I are looking to get a divorce, right? And his big concern, I know, but using this as an example, now we say, okay, great, we're going to split time. And then in his mind, he's like, okay, well, Nikki's schedule is not going to change. She's still going to be as busy as she's going to be. She's still not going to be able to drop them off to school. She's still not going to be able to pick them up and like take them to jiu-jitsu and gymnastics and swimming and doing all of that. She's still not going to be able to spend time with them. So she's going to have to hire somebody or maybe get her mom or another family member to be able to support her. And then why am I getting essentially shafted from like time with my kids so I can give my kids to their mom who's not even present and not even there because she has work to do. And she's always been like this. Right. So how is something like this really handled? Right. Especially it's especially for parents that also travel. Right. It's like, okay, I have time with the kids now, but like crap, I have to take a last minute flight.
Okay. So how's it handled? So as a mediator, right? So now here's both people. This is what they want. We want 50-50, right? And I'll be working with them to understand this has been the history. How can things be different now so that you can be present or that you can be? And sometimes people haven't really thought things through. They just know, I want this. So very gentle, but is this feasible? Right? Is this feasible? Are there changes that you can make to make it feasible? Right? Why are we caught up in the 50-50? Is this really to do with, I feel that if my children aren't with me as much as they're with him, that my relationship won't be as strong? Is it a child support thing? Because, people think if I get 50-50, then my child support payment goes down. Not necessarily, because if one parent, people don't know, if one parent is making a lot less money and the other parent has a very high income, the child support, there may still be a payment because it's to even out the homes. So the children aren't living in a tent in one house and in a house with the other, right? Yeah. So it's figuring out that and really having parents understand what's going to work. And maybe, and I see it a lot, and one parent's getting angry about this too, because they're threatened that now we're separated, now we're divorced, and you were never around when we were married. And now suddenly you're able to do this, this, and this. So I have one father right now who has actually taken a new job. The pay is actually very similar, but the hours are better. And now he's able to be hands-on. And mother is like, no, this has been my role. But it's just a really hard pill for a lot of people to swallow, that marriages are systems. Okay. And this was the way your system, family systems, area 101. This is how your system worked. Okay. Jeff did the grocery shopping, Jeff did the dinner, Nikki did this, that, whatever. But now you're apart. And guess what? A new system is born. So it changes things. Yeah. So, right. If you have a parent who's willing, who's able, and who can, just because this happened isn't necessarily what's going to happen, right? So what would you do with this family? Okay, so we acknowledge that this may not be feasible, or if it is, why it isn't. Somebody may, again, need some help with some counseling or coaching of getting to that place, understanding that, yeah, things are changing in every way, and it feels like I'm losing control, but I got to be child focused, Is this person capable? A lot of times you'll hear, no, they're not capable whatsoever. But let's see, right? Let's see what's going to be. Voice of the child, clauses, things like that. Just understanding that things are constantly going to need to change. None of us have a wand. None of us know. We think we're making the best decisions for the children today, but stuff changes.
Yeah. Well, Jenn, thank you so much for coming on the show. This is all such great information. And I know that it's going to help so many people that are listening right now because it's really insightful. There's a lot of terms that we talked about that people don't really even know or have ever heard of. And, people don't really go into divorce really understanding what it entails and what options there are. Right. Which is kind of like a huge reason why I do the show, because it brings on, like, say, for example, parenting coordination. Oh, that's actually an option if we are in a high conflict situation. We can't talk to each other. And it's so easy for me to turn around and be like, oh, just get along. Right. For me, it's like, I want to be able to protect the money. I don't want people to be spending money. I'm like, oh, just get along. But it isn't so simple. Right?
It's never simple. There's so many things, and that's another show. But, has there been abuse in this relationship? Let's talk about hurt and affairs. Let's talk, domestic violence, which coercive control, financial control, not just hitting, kicking, spitting, punching, right? There's all these underlying things and reasons why things are not, let's say the friendly divorce.
Well, I guess you're going to be back. So talking about those.
I love talking to you, Nikki. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, Jenn. Well, Anytime. Thank you guys for watching. If you'd like to work with Jenn, definitely check out the link below. I will also link our previous episode so you can catch up on that and learn more about what she has to say. Bye, everyone. Have a great week. Until next week. See you then.